Welcome to another virtual stage event. Today marks a first in our history, the first non-Singapore-based event we've ever held. To start to live up to our name of being the Southeast Asian Association of Graduate Employers, we've invited some good friends of ours from across the causeway to kickstart our Guide to ASEAN series with an introduction of Malaysia's early talent landscape. Today we've got three great speakers, all based in KL, joining us. Eileen from the Asia School of Business will talk about Malaysia's education system. Daniel from Oracle will give us an employer's perspective. And Nabil from Graduan will give tips and tricks on how best to connect with early talent in the country. Thanks so much for joining us. It feels like it's been, although it's only been like a month or two, but lots of things have obviously happened since those few months. Apologies for the late start as well. I'm having some technical difficulties today, so that was basically on me. The guests have been great, all waiting patiently, and I appreciate you guys doing the same here. Really excited to see so many of you, both familiar faces, and I know we have quite a few people here today joining us for the very first time. So for all of you joining for the first time, this is very exciting to have you. My name is John, and I am the Executive Director of SAGE, the Southeast Asian Association of Graduate Employers. And today we are doing something very special, right? And, you know, this year's obviously been a tricky year for all of us, but I think one thing that's we at SAGE have been, trying to take advantage of is trying different experiments throughout 2020, trying different formats of things, different types of topics, to test what you guys like, get your feedback, and as we start to plan for 2021 and beyond, I think we'll have a real awesome slate of things for you. And if you've been seeing our email newsletters, one thing that you'll know that we're very excited about trying to do is kind of live up to our name a little bit. I mean, if I had to be really honest, the organization now is, 6-7 years old, and although we call ourselves the Southeast Asian Association, we are very heavily Singapore focused, right? And I thought it was about time that we try to live up to our name a little bit. And I think in 2021, you'll see us do a little bit more of this. But today, for the very first time in our organization, we are doing something that's not about Singapore at all. But the next best thing, right across the way. We're not venturing too far yet. To our friends across the causeway in Malaysia to talk a little bit of what it's like there and to understand the market, especially when it comes to graduate recruitment, which is the lens that most of us operate under. And I've invited three of our very close friends who know a little bit about Malaysia from the education perspective, from the employer's perspective, and from the vendor service provider perspective, which are really the three main stakeholders that SAGE represents. So we're really, really excited to have them here. In terms of rules of engagement, how to interact with us, there are many different ways. One way that you can do it is through the chat. So if you want to ask questions, don't be afraid to drop us a message in the chat. Another one you can do, which I encourage you to do, is you can hit the raise hands button on your screen. So if you go under participants tab and then the bottom left, there's a little button there. That will raise a little blue thing that I'll see, and then I'll be moderating the discussion. I can, bring you into the conversation. You can come off mute, turn your camera on, and have a chat directly with our panelists. Or, feel free, like Anthony, and we always appreciate Anthony giving us the love. You can have your cameras on with us the whole time. It gives, if you're not familiar with this, it gives our panelists and our speakers a lot more energy when they can see you. Right? Although many of you do have lovely profile photos that I'm looking at. Benedict, I'm looking at yours right now. Yours is in the middle square in my screen. So I love your profile pic, and Camille, I see you too. But when we see the real thing, it changes the discussion a little bit. So I encourage you to do that when you're available to do that. That would be awesome. Okay. I'll start with a little bit of a moderated discussion with our panelists initially, just to kind of get the conversation going, but there'll be lots of time to ask them questions if you'd like to. We're going to keep this to an hour, so 5:30 is what I'm striving for today, not our usual hour and a half, because I know there are many things going on, and these webinars I know are getting... Generally, Zoom fatigue is kicking in, I appreciate. So we'll try to be a little bit more concise with what that is, but hopefully, again, lots of good stuff will happen. And we'll tell you what we're doing at the very end, what's coming up next. Okay? So without further ado, let's go to our panelists today. And I'll start from my left and work my way over to the right. Why don't I ask Eileen first to introduce herself?
Hi, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. So it is my absolute pleasure to share this wonderful evening with all of you. My name is Eileen Agan. I am currently part of Asia School of Business Career Development team. And please bear with me, I'm going to put in a little plug of ASB here. So ASB is a relatively new school here in KL. It's a collaboration between MIT Sloan and Bank Negara. And I think together with Sloan, we believe that the future is in Asia, right? So we currently only have an MBA program, and we are looking at introducing a Masters in Central Banking next year. So career-wise, I wasn't always in higher education. In fact, this is my fourth pivot, which is why I'm a perfect example to be in career development. But after undergrad, I was already set to pursue my postgrad anti-cancer studies, but I chanced upon a role to join an airline, Malaysia Airlines back then. And that was some 11 years ago. And then from then on, I joined retail, and I went on to oil and gas, and then now in higher education. So I am truly a product of the Malaysian education system. My whole entire education from kindergarten until my tertiary education was in Malaysia. So thanks, John, for inviting me, and I look forward to having this engaging conversation with all of you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eileen. Daniel, over to you next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's keeping well and not feeling too fatigued from the Zoom. I just came out with 4 or 5 hours just today itself, so hopefully we'll keep it crisp and engaging. So I'm with Oracle tech company. So this is my third year with the company, third year plus. My role with them is I manage the graduate program. Though every time when I go in for sessions, sometimes the students do mistaken me for the students themselves, but that's fine. Yeah, so my background comes very much from the recruitment, and I would say some of the HR space. So this is probably my almost 14 years in the space. So I also look forward to hearing from the rest of you all, and also learning potentially, on how you guys do things as well. But let's make this an engaging one. So yeah, feel free to share, and we'll learn from each other.
Thank you, Daniel. And last but not least, Nabil.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, John. I'm very happy to be here. Maybe a little bit about ourselves. I came from Singapore. So my parents started this company when maybe about 26, 27 years ago. They moved to Malaysia to start this Graduan. Graduan is a career resource for graduates that it's more like we're promoting companies to the graduates we started out with magazines, articles and interviews are all there so that the graduates know which companies are actually hiring fresh graduates. In the 90s, most people are looking for experienced hires. So the graduates don't know who they can go to. How do I get experience if you don't give me a job first? But fast forward, we started doing career fairs. We do in Australia, in UK, and in KL. And now the magazines are this is the last year I'm doing a magazine. From now on, it's just all digital stuff, online videos and webinars and interviews. It's all online now. So very good to be here, and I'll look forward for the session later.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we've got a really good cross-representation here, and these guys know the market quite well. So let's just dive right into it. And I thought we'd start with the bottom up, which is education first, to understand a little bit about the system, how it works, the good and the bad a little bit. So why don't I turn it over to Eileen first. Can you just give us a little overview of the Malaysia education system, how many years, and probably focusing a little bit on the last few, since we're interested in graduates there. How does it work, and percentage people, all that good stuff here. So I'll turn it over to you, Eileen.
Yeah, so the education system here is quite similar to a lot in the Asian countries here, right? So there's preschool, and then there's primary school. Primary school is about, in the public sector, it's about 6 years. and then there's secondary education, and then there's a sort of a middle pre-U, and then there's the tertiary education, right? And you can, in Malaysia, you either go via the public or a private institution route. And the public schools here are heavily subsidized by the government, but it's also equally difficult to get in. Yeah, so for tertiary education, there is a few different options, right? Both in terms of public and private. You do have the normal route of the public universities. You also have polytechnics. And I think at this moment right now, there is a emphasis by the government to push for technical and vocational education training as an option, right? Because I think the idea is that we want to tell the youth here is that, you know, getting a degree or getting a diploma, getting a formal education is not the only way, right? You can also still get that via a vocational training. Because I think the idea here is to provide options, right? To have options available for people. So yeah, and I think the numbers that I got from this paper that I was referring to, which is the Khazanah Research Institute numbers on the school to work transition of young Malaysians, right? I think 2/3 of secondary school students do get into tertiary education, right? And out of that 2/3, I think half are in private institutions, but only about 9% are in polytechnics. Yeah, but overall in the Malaysian market, right, I think in 2017, only about 28% of Malaysia's labor has tertiary education. We see an increase. I mean, the current generation, the youth of today are definitely highly educated, but they are also the group who face a lot of challenges to get the right jobs.
Okay, I feel like that's a cliffhanger, which we'll talk more about. I think as we go. You know, my understanding too is that the education even pre-U is quite robust, and there are also quite a few Malaysians that go overseas to top tier universities. What's your thought about the ones who study overseas? Do they come back a lot, or is it more like other countries where once they're out, they want to hang out there and live the life, and maybe later down the road they want to come back?
It is a great mix. It is a mix of those. So I think we do have a lot of private universities here who prepare students to go out, right? Like they have a twinning program. They can do a couple of years here and a couple of years with the partner in universities outside. So there are those, and I think you know, the government did set up this, I don't know, this corporation called Talent Corp a couple of years ago to actually bring back Malaysians back to Malaysia, right, with incentives like, you know, reduced tax and whatnot. So there is some effort to bring Malaysians back, but it really depends on the individual, right, and the kind of roles that they are looking for. So some would still want to come back home to serve here, but some, depending on the kind of jobs that they are holding, they would prefer to stay and gain some experience outside first before coming back.
Awesome. And maybe the last one before we move on, Eileen. Public versus private. You mentioned that public obviously is heavily subsidized, competitive, not as many spaces, and I guess that's where private's kind of, you know, tried to fill in the void here. What's the reputation between these two streams? Is it like, you know, public is where everybody wants to go, and because it's so competitive, if that doesn't happen, then private is the second choice, and then from there, what's the mindset that students think when they have to choose?
Yeah. I think right now, the private universities are really doing very well. I think reputation-wise, a lot of people also do consider private, right? But public universities, people strive to get in just because it's a lot cheaper, right? I think, I'm not sure what the cost is right now, but back in my days, right, it was probably 20 to 30%, probably 70% cheaper to go into public universities compared to private universities. And I think there is some, you know, noise around how the entrance into public university is not exactly fair. I mean, I think Daniel will probably even know this, but there is some talks around it, but it is not easy to get into public universities. But once you get in, but then I would say actually it's the same, right? Coming out from a public or private universities, it's more or less the same reputation-wise. It's just which one you could get in, right? Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a nice segue then over to Daniel from the employer's perspective, little Daniel. So why don't we pick up this thread here from Eileen before we talk more about, your perspective as an employer. But when you look at the young students before they get there, private versus public, what's your thought? Is there much difference there? Do you look at them differently, different strengths and weaknesses? And any comments generally about the education system?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just draw from my own experience, maybe from different employers, the pool of people that they target, and the group might be also varying. So my first company that I hired graduates into was PayPal, and in Malaysia, our presence was really more of an operations center. And typically, the roles that we would bring people in would be the call center type of roles, people who would work on a back-end operation. So, certain banking skills, finance, those probably would be what we would be looking for. And to us, the language was pretty important. So back then, we would have a preference for the private universities, just mainly because the curriculum was a little bit more robust to a certain extent for selected schools. And the other thing that differentiated them, at least in our experience or back then, was really, I think, the language competency, where we would require them to be able to articulate at a pace where they could be comfortable enough to speak to customers in the US or the UK. So a certain degree of that, and we found that we could have a variety of choices, and typically the private schools may have some variations to offer. In this current role that I'm in right now for Oracle, for the KL portion, we actually have a hub, a sales hub mainly. And so most of the roles that we would look at would be, somebody who could cover technology and articulate it as well. So in that sense, it's a hybrid, right? You need people who may be having some savviness in the IT space, but they also should be comfortable talking. And that's where we found, I think, some of the public universities.
Daniel warned me that this would potentially happen. Yeah.
Bluetooth just went off for 4 hours. Anyways, that's a real thing. So, so I was just mentioning that for the current portion, we do see that some of the private schools do have, I guess, some decent technical students. But to us, I think the language bit, you do have to be a little bit more selective, and that really means that in the go-to-market approach, it may mean that you need to put in more effort to engage the students just even before they graduate, because they're a little bit more selective and they have choices, and they have that ability to be able to articulate better than others. But I guess our leaning will still be skewed a little bit towards the private per se. And yeah, this is maybe our own personal preference.
Let's zoom out a little bit, Daniel, since we've been talking about private public, but if we just zoom out and look at Malaysia talent in general, and in your role in Oracle, I'm assuming you look at people from the region, right? Not just Malaysia, but you've got the Singaporeans and others in the region, your graduate program for Oracle. What if you had to contrast, the Malaysian talent versus others in the regions? What would you say are the differences there, strengths and weaknesses? Is it easy to tell, or it's quite seamless, it blends in a lot? Give us a little insight on that.
Well, it's actually, when you mention this question, a little bit harder to pinpoint, because it's a bit hard to box everybody in a category per se, right? Because everybody is still kind of unique in that sense. But I think one thing that I do find while interacting with some of the graduates probably would be the ability to mix well with others. I guess it's just really from a diversity perspective. When they go to school, many of the universities also do come with foreign students, not necessarily Malaysians, dialects, etc. That does come into a good mix, actually. So when we hire people, we find that they, in a larger group, they do have a decent social skill in that sense when it comes to mixing around, etc. But I think if we were to compare, say, like in Singapore and Malaysia, I think the difference isn't too vast. But if I had to compare with, say, some of the graduates, like say in Thailand, where we do also sometimes bring them in, or Vietnam, because the schools are a little bit more singular track, where they may not have so many foreign students, and so the ability to gel in that sense may be a little bit lesser. That's just based on observation.
Okay. If you're a new employer trying to move into Malaysia, whether you're hiring Malaysian talent for a different country or potentially setting up some presence in Malaysia, are there some gotchas that you need to be aware of, especially working with the young ones, not necessarily the experienced talent that have been around a little bit and that can probably be on board a little bit easier? But if we're talking people straight from school, like internships, do they have some savviness, or is there a lot of stuff that you have to be a little bit more aware of, especially the things like cultural sensitivities that might be different than other parts of the world? Do you have any insights or advice for new employers?
Well, I think this one really boils down back to the culture of the company, meaning to say, like, things that, because it's a diverse type of culture. So in certain areas where it's common to, let's say, have happy hours, on a Friday in Singapore, and over here for some companies it may be that just because their personal preference is not to drink, then that might be just some of those things that, assuming if there's a graduate program that you guys are planning to run, then that's probably something to be maybe aware. But the rest of it are quite general with the rest of, I guess, the region, I would probably say.
Okay, awesome. I see the questions coming into the chat. We're gonna get to that. I want to get Nabil in here to say a couple words to get him going, and then we'll come to the chat and keep going that way. Nabil, obviously you interact a lot with students from a slightly different perspective, and you see them broadly across. Anything you want to add to what we've talked about a little bit about the university system before we talk about other things like how to even reach students, other than the best way to reach them? But what's your thought about the education system?
Actually, I was studying all my life in Singapore until I finished NS. But because Singapore's system is that, okay, I wasn't a very good student. I went to the Polytechnic. I graduated from there, but my grades were not good enough to get into NUS or NTU. So in my time, there was NUS, NTU, or SMU. So, but my parents have already moved to KL. Then they told me, hey, come to Malaysia. There's a Monash here. You can definitely get in with my grades, because you already have a Singapore Polytechnic diploma. So I went to Monash, which was in Sunway at that time. Then I did not realize that Malaysia had so many. It's actually an education hub. I go because it was at Sunway University or Sunway University College at the time. You can take courses from all the major universities from all over UK and US. And you take like what Eileen said, the training programs, and then if your grades were not good and everything, you can take the foundation year. That should be easy to get through, and then you can go to any universities you want. From that point on, somebody can just jump in to get into your place into a good university anywhere in the world. And it's just not just Sunway. I think a lot of the private universities have that sort of tuning programs. Then I realized there's a Nottingham University also. So it's my choice. But at that time, most of my friends were in Singapore. They all go to Australia. They went to Melbourne. So I chose Monash. Because after a year or after two in the middle, I switched to move to Australia to finish up my education. So I did not realize, because growing up in Singapore, I don't know, maybe Singaporeans always have the mentality we're better than everyone else. But until I come to Malaysia, there are so many talented people, and the education system is actually, and it's very good. It's like it gave me a second chance like that. So that's one thing good about the education system here. But on how I was, if I was to start a company or coming into Malaysia, the best way to reach out to the graduates is through the student groups. That's one of the best ways of reaching out to the student group. That's not when I do my events in UK or Australia. Obviously, we go through the universities, the career counseling department, but we go through the university, the student group, the Malaysian Society of each university. And that way, they have to spread the word faster. I'm like going off topic here. Already.
No, I think that's great. I mean, one of the questions in the chat that we just had now is that engaging with the public universities, which might be a little different than the private universities, can be a little bit tricky here, and that the career centers might not be as mature. So, are you suggesting, hey, don't worry about them, go around them, go directly into the student groups? Okay. And if so, what's the best way, right? Like a broker like you would be the best way, or you can just go directly. They're very public.
Because we have a relationship with the career counselors. Obviously, when you go to the public university, sometimes they don't answer the phone, they don't answer the emails. It's very difficult to get them. But maybe you should try out but some of them are getting more mature. They're starting to set up their own group that they're called CDCC, Career Development Career Center, CDCC, Career Development something. There she knows. So when they form a group, I think it's about a few universities and a few polytechnics, they come together and they work as a group together. So one of the best ways is to get through to this CDCC and they'll connect you to the right people. Certain universities are good in certain things.
I mean, that's really interesting, right? A combined approach, which is not something you see in many parts of Asia here, where it's every school for themselves, all trying to compete themselves. And I'm sure as employers, it's always better to go to a centralized place versus going to each individual school. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Nabil, tell us a little bit about young Malaysians right now in terms of how they think about careers and jobs. Because I mean, part of, I know your platform is not only bringing the employers to them, but I saw something recently about demystifying some of the thoughts between young people or what it's out there here. Like when it comes to career mindedness, do the young Malaysians, before they get to work for their first job, do they have a good idea? Are they a little bit more naive here? Given your interaction with them, I'd love to get your thoughts first, and then we'll come to Daniel on that one.
Well, it's just my own personal experiences and observations also. Okay, let's say I do a career talk in Malaysia. When I go to the public unis, good crowd. But I go to the private unis, not so good crowd, which is strange because the private unis are so-called the better students in a way, because private unis are more expensive. So when it's more expensive, you usually come from the better well-off families to put you into a better uni. This is just a general. So if you come off with a better environment that you're growing up, you tend to speak better, you tend to interact with people better, you try to carry yourself better. So, but at the same time, they take things for granted, or they're not as hungry as if you do a public uni. But that's not, if I go to out of town, say Johor, not say Penang, but I'd say like Perlis, Kedah, Pahang, the little towns, they are so hungry because nobody goes there. I do a talk, it'll be full house. That's the difference. They're hungrier in the smaller towns, especially Sabah, Sarawak. Then when I do it in Australia, this is a few years ago, now it's better. When I do many years ago, some of them would come in like dressed very casually, and they come late to the career fairs, like when I organize a career fair. But when I do it in UK, everyone is at 9 o'clock, the whole hall is packed already. They are wearing suits and they are very impressive. And so it's just different. I don't know. I don't know why, but I think maybe it's the culture of the country, or maybe Australia is a bit more laid back. UK is a bit more, everybody wants to be the next banker or next consultant. They dress well, they speak very well. Not say Australia not, but they're a bit more laid back. In KL, a bit more, it's mixed. KL is too diverse already in Malaysia. Some good, some not so hungry, but it's just so different here. You have to know where to go, and it takes like a bit of experience.
Thanks so much for introducing that, Nabil. Daniel, from an employer's perspective, and this is one thing, especially if you're Singapore-based, you take for granted. I mean, we call it a country, but we're really just a city here, and you can get to either side within an hour. But obviously, Malaysia is a much bigger country, and things are spread out. And just like Nabil said, you've got, main cities, tier one cities like, KL, and then you've got smaller cities, and then the really small towns. As an employer, how do you look at that? Do you really need to focus here because it's a large population spread out here, or do you need to spread across and kind of change your strategies and don't be afraid to go out to further out to find some of these maybe diamonds in the rough?
Yeah, I think this is really dependent on individual. We don't really hire in large droves. So for us, but the challenge that we have is we have very diverse language groups that we need to target because while the roles are based on KL as a hub, we sometimes even need to get people who are Cambodian speaking and Myanmar speaking or Burmese speaking. So that would mean that the local Malaysian universities would not typically have such kind of graduates, and then that's where we would expand it. For us, we have a few selected universities that we generally work with. A lot of them on the list are actually private universities, and are leading to the fact for us as an employer, it is also not easy to work with some of the public universities just because you need to find your way around to the right person who would come back to you. But one good tip I would share, and just based on experience, though it started off as a bit of a tedious process, start with potentially the lecturers and try to get introduced to potentially some of the student associations, which what Nabil has shared earlier on. So that way, if you have a foot in, they usually would have certain activities. So that's a good starting point. And every year when they do have sort of elections for presidency, etc., that's where you would have to keep up with who's the next point of contact to go into. Yeah, so that's how we would usually do it for the universities. And when we do the targeting, it is a bit more selective per se, because we don't hire in very large volume, but we do have to reach out to potentially some of the unis that we don't do as much engagements in KL, but just because it's a language requirement, like in Thailand, we reach out to Chula and etc. and so on. But yeah, it's a small team, so we have to be very selective on how we engage.
Fair enough. Let's get to the chat. There's a bunch of different things. I'm going to start with Eileen. There are a couple questions from Carrie Ann HSBC about just getting some statistics around students with degrees, private versus public, or breakdown between demographics, gender, etc., etc. Is this information published somewhere, like the Education Ministry? Do they have stats that they collect and publish? Where would you go about looking for this kind of information?
So I would say that it's available across a few different places, right? I don't think there's one specific place for all of this information. I think preparing for this is what I myself was looking through, if there is a one-stop information center for all this, but I came to realize, no, there's not one. But what was really helpful is research papers conducted by research institutes that works very closely with the Department of Statistics in Malaysia. So they are the ones who actually come up with very clear reports about these questions that you have. I think what we can do after this is I'll probably share across a few links and yeah, for you to refer to. But the quick answer is it's not all in one place.
Yeah, which I think we're spoiled when you come from Singapore. Most governments don't have their act together that way, and you have to piece it together. So definitely thank you for sending that over, and we'll make sure that we share it out here. Heidi from Hong Kong at CUHK had a question about what's popular these days in terms of the types of things that people want to study. Does anybody have a take on that? Eileen, do you want to go first? What do you think?
I would say something based on what the interactions that I see. But Nabil and Daniel, please feel free, because I think you meet a lot more students, right? But what I would say is students today, they are more exposed to the kind of jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago, right? A lot of these internet-related roles, just a definition I would call it. But I think they're also stuck with what their parents want them to do. That's personally for me, right? I think students are exposed to newer kind of roles that are available, but they're also stuck in between what their parents want them to do. And I think a lot of these parents want them to go via a more traditional professional roles, right? Like the regular doctor, engineer, lawyer kind of roles. So I think students do get caught in there. I would say that the urban students are a lot more exposed to newer kind of roles. So urban students are the ones who know what fintech is, what data science is, but then students in rural areas, they are not exposed at all. They know the kind of roles that they can see, right? But I think there is a large disparity in that sense. So yes, you do see a lot of interest in fintech and digital stuff, data science, but I think it's rather small, right? It's only open to those who are in urban areas. Yeah.
Either gentleman want to comment on that, or even something a little bit broader here? I mean, like the hopes and dreams and the fears of a young Malaysian. Can you comment a little about that? Like, are they like maybe Eileen mentioned, saddled with a lot of the pressure that many Asian cultures have? This whole expectations between what I want versus what my family wants. And I'd be curious what your thoughts about, like, do they look abroad? Do they look what's going on in the region? Do they have aspirations more globally here? Or, I mean, Malaysia is already big enough as it is and crazy enough as it is that maybe, majority actually just focus domestically.
I would say that, most Malaysians, they would want to work overseas. But when talks about like fintech and all that, yeah, like what Eileen says, the newer jobs, most of the urban students, they are the ones who are more exposed to it. And when I have been having these webinars throughout this whole week, because I'm having a virtual fair happening right now. If I look at the chat box and the questions, most of them saying, are you hiring now that this pandemic has happened? I think at least for now, they want to get a job they just want to get a job. I mean, to the field that they want. There will always be, of course, there are expectations of the parents to be a doctor, lawyer, and an engineer, but it's slowly opening up to more tech companies. Shopee has been really very aggressive nowadays. I've been seeing and all the banks are also hiring all the IT people. Actually, most of the people I meet are just looking for IT people, whatever industry that I see. Banks then like other data companies, data science, but again the pool is very small, and maybe a lot of Malaysians are not very strong in this science and technology stream. But there are many good universities, and a lot of them studied one thing, but they're quick enough to adapt and restudy and become suddenly, like after a few months of learning, they can develop apps and they can do code. Like they quite what's the word? Not say versatile, but they can adapt quite well.
Would you say a lot of that adaptation too is kind of self-sourced versus like going to another school or some sort of institute to get the retraining, reskilling, relearning? A lot of it's just done from their own, desire and resources, or do people go to, I don't know, well-defined paths?
there are a few places that's giving training. Sometimes the company send them for training. Sometimes now MDEC is doing so much free online courses and everything, just to prepare the students or the people around to know that the world is changing, that sometimes a job may not be a full-time job anymore. Sometimes it could be a freelance or a gig job, even if you're an accountant also. So they're preparing more of the digital or a gig economy at this point. If I can remember, I'll put up some names of where they take up courses. I know MDEC is giving out like maybe almost free. I think they have all these programs like, I'm not so sure, e-Rezeki or something. I'll find out more. They've been emailing me to help them promote their stuff. Yeah, but it's both, because I can learn to be a programmer. I can't be a good programmer that Oracle wants to hire me. So what they do is that they have to have like a mentor, or they go to forums and they learn themselves. They need to be structured, someone to teach them structurally, or they learn themselves through their friends and everything. In a while, they will get better. Usually when they graduate from universities, let's say become software engineer, when they come out of university, when they go, they're also not very good at all. Only after a while, they get better.
So keep the questions coming in on the chat if you have them. I think we've covered most of them here. I'm debating where I'm going to ask this question next, and I was just joking with the panelists before we started here, but I'm going to ask anyways because I'm curious here. Without getting too political, right? The government and, you know, the direction the government's trying to help or not help what's going on and giving, you know, investments or you know, trying to look at the next thing and give some direction to the people. Is this something that, you know, employers should be doing their homework on and finding out what government institutes and different departments are trying to do? Or would you say, given that, you know, things are changing literally on a minute by minute, you know, hour by hour basis in the political landscape of Malaysia, that, you know, a lot of the next gen stuff will have to be driven by corporates, you know, maybe just going directly to educational institutions in different areas that want to do this stuff, maybe independence, versus waiting for the government to kind of set some direction? Dan, you got some thoughts on this one?
Then the next question you'll be asking is which government, because, you know.
Yeah, without wading into who's the government right now, which may change in an hour from now, but generally speaking, right? I mean, you know, it's been a lot of ups and downs over the years here, but you know, there is a sense that there might be some changes. And as you look into the rest of the region too, there's been some interesting things. Like in Indonesia, if we look at education, that the, you know, co-founder of Gojek was given that portfolio, which was like a total outsider to there to kind of revamp education. So obviously Indonesia's seeing that. What would you comment on, if you can, about Malaysia and you know, young talent, the future of work and stuff like that?
I would say from a policy perspective, maybe I can just start off because I think in both the companies I was with and currently we are somewhat benefiting from it. But this probably has been started off a bit earlier on. So there is the initiative of the MSc, which many companies are already part of. And what it does is if you are looking to get sort of like an employment pass for some of the non-Malaysian, let's say, students who used to be studying in Malaysia, there is something that helps you ease that process of getting the employment pass. But they would define and categorize it mainly on certain selected industries, mainly into the tech bit. But that definition can be a little bit broad per se. So those are things that are existing. The other government organization that you could also sometimes have an updated view on what's coming up will probably be like what Ali alluded earlier, Talent Corp. They do have some talent-related initiatives that may fall into what you might be looking for. Maybe it's an internship, etc., and you're trying to get some sort of tax relief. They do have some schemes around that as well. So that will probably be the two places I would just start a high-level exploratory thing to see if anything fits into it. But if there are, you know, certain initiatives that you want to just pilot it on a smaller scale, I would say just go ahead and, you know, start off with the career services and work with the unis. And then if that doesn't give you the approach that you or the results you want, then try to go a little bit lower to the grassroots, like lecturers and student groups. That's what I would say. I don't know whether that answers to the question, John, but yeah. Maybe
Sure. Eileen, I'd be interested in your thoughts if you have any macro perspective, because actually the Asia School of Business, ASB, which is where you work today, is kind of an interesting, I wouldn't call it experiment, but like, a next gen thinking where the Central Bank of Malaysia inviting a well-known university like MIT to collaborate to develop something in Malaysia to kind of, put Malaysia on the map a little bit on the world stage with education. I mean, to me, that sounds like a very bullish and very bold move. Any thoughts on, is this just a one-off thing where the government's trying to get its act together a little bit here? What would you say?
So I think it was really a big push by the then governor of Bank Negara, right, who is really big she is really big in believing that talent, right, has to be developed, right, and there's no in a long-term view, you need a business school, or you need this kind of magnet attraction to develop talents, right, which is why that whole idea started. So I mean, it is ASB's mission to develop principled and transformative leaders here, and I think pulling MIT into the picture is because all these mature frameworks in these Western countries, right, where else can you test it better than in the Asian context, right? Because this is the emerging world. This is where the future lies, right? So I think that was the whole idea then. But I think there is, while reading through all this existing research and policies that are in place right now, there is great emphasis to work together with MNCs, right? I think the government they do acknowledge that there is a mismatch between what the education is offering versus what the employers really need, right? So they are looking at ways to work a lot closer with the employers, right? I think in terms of offering more action-based internships, so to speak, I think that's one word that I caught. And then I think also educating students a lot more about entrepreneurship skills. And how do you do that is to engage with employers, right? To actually get employers to offer this kind of platforms for students to learn. So there is a lot of emphasis on how they can work together with the employers to strengthen this, to narrow the gap between what schools are teaching versus what employers really need. Yeah.
You think there might be another collaboration in the short to medium term of another big, well-known uni coming in to do some stuff? I mean, the ASB is going well. The new campus in Eileen's virtual background, you see a picture of the new campus that is about to be launched very, very soon, once everybody can get back and moving freely in the city here. But, I mean, you think maybe?
I can't say, but I would like to believe that ASB will be the best school in Asia.
Yeah, so, maybe not another business school, but maybe we could have an engineering collaboration. I mean, MIT collaborated here in Singapore with something called the Singapore University of Technology and Design to get that going, and then we had liberal arts collaborations, right? So, I mean, and you already have the twinning program, so that this would be the next big step, and it'd be interesting to kind of see. I'm just throwing out my own thoughts here, but if anybody has insider info, now's a good time to drop a note in the chat and let us know what you're thinking and what you might know.
I think entrepreneurship is a really big thing that that we really want to build awareness here, right? Which is in entrepreneurship skills. I think we are also looking at building a lot more entrepreneurship labs, and then also actually introducing entrepreneurship at grassroots levels at primary schools, right? Teaching these primary school kids what entrepreneurship is all about. That is one of a big agenda for ASB, right? In educating about entrepreneurship, right?
Just a couple more here, and I think this one's going to be for you, Nabil, to start here. In terms of tactics, when students are looking for jobs, what are the platforms they usually use? Do they use job portals only? Do they look at things at their universities only? And is there a different timing? What would be the timing, the recruiting cycle that final year graduating students start actually caring about this stuff, right? Because in Singapore, they care like in year one, they care already. They're too nervous about this stuff, and it's like 4 more years of university, but they're still so focused. What would you say in Malaysia generally?
In Malaysia, the timing. Okay, a few ways of get most among my batch of the vendors, I would say, that actually is focused mostly on universities is university graduates would be me. There is a talent bank. They do organize university fairs for universities around all the there are many universities in Malaysia, so they help the university to organize their fair. So that's from that way they get to know a lot of the university counselors, career counselors, and all that. So that's one way of doing it. I'm just naming all my competitors.
Yeah. Now's the time though. Now's the time, because you were mentioning you guys are doing stuff. This is the time, the fall of the final year would be when students are really starting to do this, not necessarily waiting till, some people wait till they're graduated and then they start looking for jobs.
No, actually the timing, right? If you are going for the public universities, it's usually during January.
Okay.
February and July. Because you got two, so February and July. So if you're doing for the Australian ones, most of them will come out. I think the exams is in November. So November, so December, January, they should be okay already. You can go after them. How I usually do it is just before the exams. That's when I start doing my career fairs. So for the UK, it's also okay. Overseas like UK and Australia. Okay, the best time is actually in July. That's where I do my career fairs and all that. However, I'm venturing out to other places. There are a lot of Malaysians everywhere else. Like there are quite a number in Japan and Korea. And in Japan, they get hired in the second year. And usually done by the Japanese companies that have an office in Malaysia. Like Sony and all that. Even like Malaysian cars like Perodua. They always ask me to get them the Japanese student, but they have their own fair in Japan by the students. That's usually I would say the best time, usually it's the end of the year or early part of the year and middle of the year.
Okay. New age stuff, like are they on the LinkedIn? Are they doing the Instagram for career stuff? TikTok? Is this the way to reach these guys? I mean, beyond platforms, and you guys have been around so long, like you and others here.
Yeah.
What are the trendy things going on now?
I used to do the magazines. Now I
Magazines
don't do the magazines.
Are gone, right? Yeah.
Then I start doing videos for the companies.
Okay.
The videos are good, but after doing so many videos, it all looks the same.
Yeah.
Every company is having the same culture. That's the funny part. But what seems to be going good for me is like when I do the webinars. So I will shoot the companies. I call it Graduate on Live. So I will get the company and we do a talk like this. At the same time, there's a chat box where all of them are chatting and asking questions, and then at the same time, they can just drop in their resumes. That seems to be going very well. I guess the companies, the students, they want to know the job first. When I did a survey of what is it that attracts you to a company now, of course, Manila, but is the culture, that's important for them. But one thing I actually pick up from when we did the survey is actually they want to know the job scope and where they will be in few years to come. So they want to see a ladder of progression in their if they join a company. So the best way I would say is always to keep engaging with them. Like they have to have a social media, like an Instagram page. I don't know about TikTok, because TikTok, you have to be very smart about using TikTok to make it not too childish lah. So, but Instagram seems okay. LinkedIn definitely. What was I going at? Okay, when I first started, a lot of people say, "Oh, you are such a small company. How many staff do you have?" Then I'm like, "Okay, how do I beat this?" When they have that impression on you. So okay, when I do events and everything, I get all the students to come in from all the different universities. Okay, you become an ambassador to Graduate. Anytime I need you, anything, I do an event, you become my ambassador. So now when someone asks me, how many people do you have? I have 20 staff, but I have 200 ambassadors. So these ambassadors in the universities will do your promotion, will promote for you, will do anything. So when you want to have talks in the university, they'll book the lecture room, they'll do everything for you. Other than the university student, other than the career counselors, you have your own ambassadors at every other universities. So that's just one of the tactics to do it.
On that note, what a great tip! The campus ambassador model, which many companies do use, a very good way to navigate, which can be a very tricky education system. Look, on behalf of all our guests today and Sage, thank you so much to Eileen, Daniel, and Nabil. I think this has been a great kickoff to what we're hoping to do more in the new year. Different country profiles as we move around Southeast Asia to live up to our name as the Southeast Asian Association of Graduate Employers. We'll make sure we follow up with our speakers on some of these links. I did want to share you one thing, a project that we are working on just a little bit behind the scenes here. And why is it not happening today? I was just going to show you a little screenshot, but what we're putting together too is what we're calling a quick guide to Southeast Asia to help employers that are moving into some of the countries that are not as well known, to help you navigate. So a little bit of the overview of an education system, some background on what students think, and some of the key contacts like some of the well-known universities, whether it's public and private, to give you a little sense of that. So we are starting as a pilot 3 countries, Singapore, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Look for that launching before the end of the year. You'll see a little snapshot, and it'll be our goal to iterate on this kind of thing and eventually have a nice little quick reference guide that we'll offer to everybody for all the countries in the region. So if you're keen to contribute, and I know many of you have, we've reached out to you. Thank you so much for giving us your thoughts. Reach out to us and let us know. In terms of our next event for the rest of the year in November, stay tuned for this. We're really excited. Another experiment. We're not going to talk about how to do graduate recruitment better. I mean, that is the focus of what we're doing. We're going to change and talk about you, the average individual, especially from the recruiter's perspective. You know, where do you go from recruiter, and the career paths that, you know, a recruiter may have, whether it's in recruitment, development, and beyond here. So we're going to invite a couple of good friends, some coaches, and those who've had different backgrounds to just kind of share their thoughts on, you know, if you're in the role today of a recruiter, what could lie next, and, you know, transferable skills and all that good stuff. So look out for that for November. And in December, we're crossing our fingers here in Singapore. We are slowly starting to get back to this, that we may have an in-person event, right? Yeah. We won't call it a holiday mixer because I'm not sure that would be allowed, but, you know, maybe like our annual general meeting, that sounds a little bit more legit, right? To bring us all together before, to kind of, I don't know, close off 2020 in a high note and look forward to 2021. So look out for our, you know, AGM/social in December. And I'm looking forward to reconnecting with many of you in person. In the meantime, anytime you want to chat, you want to learn more, especially for all our new first-time participants to Sage. If you want to know more about the organization, happy to chat anytime. I know I'm just a button click away, and love to know how we can help you more. So with that, thank you so much again to our panelists, to all of you, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Good night, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, John.
Thanks so much for listening. For more insights on early talent, check out our other videos on our YouTube channel, or visit our website at www.sageaage.org.